Good day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's English home language lesson. Thank you for joining me. It is a revision program in terms of your preparation for the March control test. Now, remember, grade 12s, we've done a lot of content already so far over the last few weeks, but I hope you paid attention to the summary skills on the 2 weeks ago lesson, and now we're working with the comprehension skills. So these are things that are going to be expected of you in the March control test and obviously in your exams going forward. So today in this lesson, which is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center, we are looking at comprehension skills in terms of your paper 1 and obviously your March control test that is now happening. So there's some feedback from what happened in 2024 in the NSC exams. So in other words, the candidates were writing, and we did the analysis and we found certain issues, okay? So we found that generally, when it comes to the comprehension part of the paper, section A of 30 marks, students were able to grasp their idea of what's going on. They could deal with concepts of the passage, but it's difficult if there's a topic that's there and you haven't kept in touch with that kind of trendy topic. So it's good for you to go back and obviously make sure that you are keeping up to date with the happenings of the world around you. All right. So the identification of the topic sentences in the paragraph still pose a problem. So you need to understand that there is a main idea in a paragraph and there's other ideas built around that particular idea. So you need to firstly find the main idea in that paragraph in relation to the topic, and then obviously look at what is being added on to that to make sense. All right. And that's how you're going to break it down to make it simpler to understand as you are going through the passage. Now, remember, grade 12s, that all the questions asked in the comprehension will follow a certain sequence. So just like the questioning happens, so too will the content in the paragraphs, okay? So there will be a logical flow of ideas. Now, when you are dealing with the questions, you see they are sequentially set up. So they will say, for example, refer to paragraph 1, or refer to line 15, or refer to paragraph 2, or refer to paragraph 3. It's telling you which paragraph or what content we're looking at when we're asking this question particularly. All right, so you need to make sure you understand that. A quotation is a question, or within a question, is an indication that the examiner expects you to translate that question or that quotation into your own words. And when you're doing that, you're equating meaning, bringing it to make sense, and then you're applying your knowledge to the question that is asked of you. All right, so make sure you understand that the quotation is guiding you to put that information to your own words and give out a response in relation to that. Good. So you also need to be mindful of the following. When you have a mark allocated to a question, now within the comprehension passage question, you would know it's 30 marks allocated to that. So there will be question 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So those questions will have a mark allocation per a question. That is the guideline for you to say, if I have a 3 mark allocated to this question, it means I need to have 2 main ideas and a comment to it, for example. Okay. If I need to have a 2 mark response, then I'm looking for 1 main idea that is substantial that will warrant me getting the 2 marks. Right. So please, grade 12s, you can't just give a one-liner answer and expect to get 3 marks, for example. Okay. So you need to show understanding of what's been happening. And I will again reiterate that that communication process that we go over, and more importantly, the Barrett's taxonomy one. But you need to also make sure that you're practicing these things by yourselves at home. There's also a problem when it comes to questions posing issues of diction, tone, style, and imagery. Now that needs to be based upon relevant quotations from the resource, in other words, from the text that is given to you. And these are then explained in context of the passage. Okay, so the answers would have to be molded, grade 12s, looking at the intention of the author. Remember, you will want to say something and you want to get that point across in a certain way. In the same way, a written piece will have a central idea that they want to talk about, and they'd like to get their idea across as well in terms of the words they're using and the imagery they are employing for that. All right, then we've got to also be mindful of the fact that there are verbs that are used for questioning. All right. So you need to go back and learn those words, those instruction words, and try and find out what is the examiner requiring of me. All right. So for example, you get words like explain, justify, discuss, comment, or critically comment. Each of these words or these terms are meaning separate things, and you need to understand what they mean. And it's frequently used throughout your exam papers. So if you haven't listened to these lessons over the time frame already, please pay attention to it going forward and ensure that you familiarize yourself with those question words. They are asking a specific idea from you when that word appears. Right. Candidates also in their responses failed to see the relationship of the text A with text B. Now, this is in the exam setup, okay? So in your control test, you may have the situation where the teacher's using maybe two texts, or they might only give you one text if you're in any of the lower grades, okay? But, or if you're doing or if you're doing an informal activity in class. So please make sure that when you look at one of the texts in relation to the other text, you're drawing a comparison between the two texts, okay? And there you've got to find the link of that one text with the other. Now, sometimes it may just be a general link, but they might then ask for a specific one where they're saying, look at paragraph 9, for example, of text A in relation to text B. And what that then means is exactly what they're asking of you. You've got to look at paragraph 9 and then find the issue that they're talking about there and relate it or compare it to text B. All right. So that is very important that you understand. When you have a comprehension passage or a test being done, you need to look for the link between the two texts. All right. So some recommendations for you, grade 12s, going forward. Please make sure that you understand the types of questions which have appeared in the previous exams or there are previous papers, such as the following. You need to go back and look at how they were phrased and how they were answered when you are comparing that with the memos that are online, okay? The explanation of the usage of a question in terms of a text, you need to look at that, right? You got to then look at the impact of a single paragraph or a single sentence paragraph. Now, that's usually when an author or a writer wants to hammer down his point. He would make a reference to the usage of the single paragraph, okay, or single line paragraph, and that is there for that reason. So go over that and understand why he has done that and what's the impact of that single sentence paragraph on you as the reader. Then look at the diction, the choice of words being used. Looks at concepts like paradox or irony. Okay, how do they affect you as a reader of that particular text? Because there's ideas shared in that text and it's meant to either motivate you or inspire you or basically, make you feel differently about an issue. All of those things will come through in terms of what the author is using in terms of figures of speech and parts of speech. Then remember that standard comparative question I spoke to you just now about, which was the last question of the paper. All right. Then look at the following in terms of stylistic devices, right? You gotta go over those stylistic devices. Find out what they are. There are generic explanations for these, and you would ask ma'am or sir in class to explain them to you if you need clarification. All right. So when you are getting this, and then you are linking this to the question in context, you are answering the question that the examiner has asked you. So for example, the writer's use of a single line paragraph would be important, and you need to understand that is part of the style in which the writer is communicating. You also have to look at the validity of the writer's conclusion, right? Because if he's concluding his idea of a particular topic, either he's achieved his point of view and achieved himself in getting his point of view across, or he hasn't. So by the time you get to the conclusion, you would have established that when you are reading. So look at that validity of that conclusion. Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? Did he answer any questions that were posed, for example? All of that needs to be focused on, right? Then look at the reasons why the writer starts a paragraph with a question. It's important. There's also that idea of the visual component on the comprehension passage, okay? Or text, sorry, as text B. So you need to please note the visual component of the comprehension question does not focus on the skills of visual literacy. So we're not testing you, for example, on adverbs and its principles, but we are looking for an answer from you that is content based. Okay, so you are going to be tested on that in the question of text B. Okay, then also remember to look for visual and verbal cues, because these aspects are used to convey the messages of a cartoon, for example. So if text B is appearing as a cartoon strip, for example, you're going to have to look at the visual and the verbal cues. The verbal is identified as this anything spoken, as opposed to the written one where they are relating to the words that you are seeing in front of you. Okay, so that is what we need to note. Also, remember in the classroom, the term verbal would typically be used to refer to any form of written dialogue present in a cartoon strip, as opposed to a visual, which refers to the visual composition and the content of the cartoon. So go back and try to understand what I'm saying there, okay? So any kind of written dialogue in terms of a cartoon can be interpreted differently when we're dealing with cartoon analysis. But if it's used in text B, you've got to remember that we're looking for a content-based answer here. Okay. So further on to this, remember the conclusion. There you're going to look at it in terms of the ideas in the conclusion. Do they link to the topic? Do they link to points made within the passage, the paragraphs of the passage? And then consider that final appeal. Is it actually making a difference to us positively or negatively when we read a text? Remember again, the quotations are the evidence for the answer. It is not an answer on its own. So you're using it to lead yourself into an answer and to obviously give your own response there. That comparison question, you need to remember, look for the primary idea of both texts and confirm the comparison between the two. All right, then here's an example of how to look at the comparison question. And we've done this before, so let's just run through it in terms of revision right now. It is like this. So you need to remember to refer to the specific paragraph of text A as the question will ask you. You have to summarize that main idea or the theme in the paragraph indicated in the question. That is for text A. Then summarize the gist of text B. Okay, so there's two texts involved, remember, right? And get that overall main idea of the passage. And then look for the similarities or the link between the two texts. So in most cases, there will be similarities between the paragraph in text A and the text B. And then while you're doing this, you're going to explain to the reader, in this case the marker, how they are similar to each other. Okay, so basically when dealing with comprehension, we're testing your ability to comprehend what a text is saying. We are expecting you to decode the message and give us your understanding of that message that the writer is trying to send out. All right, so there is two parts, as I mentioned before, text A and text B in your exam setup. or it might be also in your control test this term. And remember that text A is the written extract, and that's between 700 to 800 words for grade 12 level. And then you've got text B, which is the image that is there. Right. So the purpose of the comprehension and the comprehension skills as part of your reading and viewing that you're covering as skills this year. The exam questions based on these two texts will test your ability to do the following. We want to see, can you make sense of what you are reading and respond to questions posed on that? Can you understand the difference between what the literal meaning of the text is, and then can you find the deeper figurative meaning of the text? All right? Can you then understand what the writer's intention or purpose is for communicating in this particular way? All right? Can you then appreciate the text for what it's worth? And while reading it, can you formulate conclusions? Can you formulate judgments? Can you formulate opinions based on what you have read? And then from there, can you then dissect? Can you break it down? Can you evaluate the effectiveness of the text? That is in terms of its purpose. All right. Then further on to that, what should we do when we get a comprehension passage? The simplest way to do it is the following, grade 12s. Remember, you receive the comprehension text, you then skim through the passage quickly. In other words, try and get an overall view or idea of what is happening in the text. Once you've done that, take your eyes into search mode or look at it in search mode and go to then the title of the text. Then try and find the similarity between what you've scanned through, the content, and the title. Then from there, look at the introduction. Now we're looking at paragraph 1. That particular paragraph will introduce the ideas that the writer is going to talk about. He will create a general atmosphere about his particular content. So focus on that. The setting of where his ideas are being formulated from, or where his actions are taking place in the text, or ideas are flowing from, will also be given in the particular text. Then look at the first paragraph there as well. Read the first paragraph carefully. Usually that paragraph provides us with information that is talking about what the text is mainly about. And then the major themes are also introduced and developed in the from the first paragraph. Then once you've done that and you've gone through the content in the text, you will then go to the last paragraph, the conclusion. Now, read that conclusion and find how the writer sums up the article. So this encourages a response from you as the reader and allows you to then link all the content and the introduction to the title and find the link throughout, or the golden thread throughout the passage. Please notice how the first paragraph and this last paragraph are linking together. And then while you're doing that, look for that literal and figurative meaning of the words or the phrases or the sentences being used, okay, in that text. So as the candidate, as a grade 12 learner, you need to do the following. Firstly, do not repeat the question in your answer. Yes, you're taking points from the question to respond to it, but you are not repeating the question in its entirety in your answer. You are not also going to give us bullet point or point form answers. You've got to give us full sentences in your answers. Respond with only the information that is required of you. There is nothing interesting about reading a whole chunk of information as an answer and finding the last sentence that has the point of what needs to be said. So make sure you are also, while you are skimming and scanning, trying to bring out the gist of that paragraph and understand what that text is about. Use that mark allocation as a guideline for you, for your answer. Remember the 2 mark versus the 3 mark I spoke to you about at the beginning of the lesson. make sure you're using your own words as far as possible. Now, if you are that candidate who's struggling with the language, obviously the big words, the more in-depth understanding is not going to be there, okay? So you then need to ensure that you're finding key words, key phrases, key aspects in the text, and you may be using that in your answers, okay? So that would also show that you can still formulate a response, even though you may not be able to put it in your own words, and you'd be marked accordingly for that. All right. However, if you are asked to quote, for example, a sentence or a statement or whatever it is from the text, doesn't usually happen in home language, but if you are asked that kind of question, then you have to quote specifically what they are asking of you. When you are asked for your view, yes, it's good of you to have your own view, but again, it has to be contextualized with the content that you are dealing with, and it has to be very much substantiated to make sure that we understand that although you have a differing point of view, it is valid in terms of what you have given us as a conclusion or an idea of what you thought about it. Okay, substantiation is very important. So, recapping, how do you unlock a comprehension passage? First step, you skim through the passage quickly, get the general idea. You then read the passage, linking the content to the title. Thirdly, you encourage yourself to ask leading questions. So you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm reading all this content. I now need to pose certain questions to myself and see that I understand the text. All right. Once you've done that, you read again. And this time you will focus the content that you're at that point in relation to the questions being asked. And then once you've done that, you're going to read again. So you can see there's a lot of reading that's coming through here, but it is reading with understanding. All right. And then answer the questions. Once you've done that, now go back and check that your answers are actually relevant to what the question's asking of you. All right. And then if you're looking at the Barrett taxonomy, I'm going to take a break for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll be back shortly with the continuation of the lesson.
Excellence. Excellence is a habit. Excellence is a quality you have, a quality I have. It's a quality we have when we honor what is true to us. Yes, we are gifted differently. uNkulunkulu akasinganga ngokufana. Excellence is striving for your best. Whenever you have a particular project, test, homework, uzibuze, ask yourself, is this my best? Can I put in more effort? Excellence is striving to be in the top 1% of the area in which you are gifted. And so I challenge you, in every single thing that you do, in every single area that you're gifted in, whether it's sports, it's academic, ucula, whatever that gift is, strive for excellence.
I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions. Number 1, what do I want? Do I want to become an A student or do I want to become an average student? Number 2, I want you to ask yourself, how do you plan on getting there? Are you going to put more extra hours or are you going to just sleep? Number 3, who will be with you in this journey? Because it is important that we associate ourselves with students who have the same vision as us, who want to become a student, who want to put in the extra work, who want to become better at what they do. Unsuccessful people do not plan, they just let life happen to them. But successful people are planning on how they want their lives to be. And right now, you plan on how you want your results at the end of the year to be like.
Welcome back, grade 12s, and it is our English home language lesson, and I'm continuing with the comprehension skills that you need to ensure that you master before you writing your March test, okay, as well as your June examinations. So this is just a recap of the Barrett's taxonomy that we use as examiners to assess your understanding of text that you are reading. So whatever you're interacting with in the world, in terms of what you're reading or you're seeing, you should be taking in the information and then understanding it on a literal level, for example, where you are able to recall information from what you've seen or read. You need to then be able to reorganize the ideas that were showcased to you. Can you see that this is right or that's wrong? And can you analyze those ideas? Okay. Then can you infer a meaning of from what you have read? Can you draw conclusions? All right. That's where we're testing your level 3 of understanding. Then we got the other one where we're looking at, once you've read all of these things, are you able to then formulate an opinion? Can you then see that this is valid or not valid based on what you've read? Can you judge whether a text is reaching its audience in the correct way or not? That kind of thing. And then the level 5 that we speak about, which is that one about the impact on you as the reader. We are testing the emotional aspect. When you read the text, how did it affect your feeling about the content that is being spoken about? So that's just a quick recap for you on the Barrett taxonomy, and what kind of words we would be using, for example, is also very important. Okay, so when we're looking now at text, let's look at the one that we had in the 2017 English paper 1 of February. Now, I know it seems a bit like it's not, 2 or 3 years ago, but nevertheless, we've done those ones before, so we're going to look at now a little bit far back as maybe the last 5 years of text, okay? Because practice makes perfect. Notice the changes that might happen during that on the paper that's happened from 2017 up until now. You'd go through those things, okay? So in terms of this particular paper, you can access it access this on the GDE website. That's just me making a mistake where my ideas are in my head and my thought pattern is not coming too clearly. And this is what happens when you communicate. All right. Now you adapt. You think to yourself, what happened and how am I going to now make sure it is sorted out? So in terms of the comprehension passage, this is not how you would see it in the exam paper. There would be an instruction saying to you, read the following text A, below, and answer the question set, for example. Then you would have text A written there and a box format which would include the text. Okay, so from paragraph 1 all the way to paragraph 6 or 7, for example, depending on how many paragraphs it takes us to get to the 700 or 800 words that we require. All right, so this one was talking about the psychology of extreme sports, why we want the thrill. So it was delving into the idea of when we are doing extreme sports. Now we're talking about extreme sports that might be like your car racing or your bicycle, your motorbike racing, all right? That kind of thing. It is an extreme sport, right? Because you are racing against a time to try and get to a particular point. You try and be safe, yes, but there's almost a 50 to 70% chance that you could crash into the side of the curb, cause an accident, or even your brakes may fail or whatever it is. So it is an extreme sport, all right? So we're looking in this text about the psychology. What's the thinking pattern of why I would engage in extreme sports, for example, all right? Because we want the thrill, for example, is what this author is speaking about. So when you're reading, again, that's how to look at what the title already signaling a point of view to us. And while you're reading paragraph 1, 2 going forward, you'll try and find the important information. So if you look at paragraph 1, it says, on the 14th of October 2012, more than 8 million viewers watched one event across the world. So that's important, okay? There's 8 million, more than 8 million people looking at this event, making it the biggest televised event to date. It was not the presidential election or a royal wedding or an Olympic ceremony, but the mere sight of daredevil Felix Baumgartner risking his life by jumping from 40 kilometers above the earth. So that is an event that is important. So where in comparison to a presidential election, this one superseded the amount of people that paid attention to it. So already that's the main idea, the event that was taking place where the daredevil was doing the risky jump. Would such a bizarre event attracted millions of us why such an event attracted millions of us is questionable. Why do dangerous activities like extreme sports excite us? What motivates us to participate in them, and why we want the thrill? There are thousands of explanations for why we enjoy extreme sports. Going back to our innate needs and desires, however, the following are arguably some strong explanations of our attraction to risk. So here, grade 12s, you need to go and find out what is the main idea in this paragraph. Is it the fact that the questions are being posed as to why we want the thrill, or is it the fact that there are 1,000 of explanations as to why we enjoy this? So because it affects our innermost desires. So is that the main idea? You need to deduce that when you are reading the text, okay? Thirdly, we go on to the paragraph 3 there. Again, look at the line count is 15 to 20, line 20 at the end of paragraph 3. So again, when you ask to refer to a line reference, you're looking at these lines given to you, or you're looking at the top where it says refer to paragraph 3. Top left-hand side on my side. For you, it will be also the top left-hand side. All right. So you need to then look at that in terms of the paragraph. When we're looking at these little numbers on top of the words, that is because that term may be a difficult term to understand. So we include it in the glossary at the end for you to see maybe an easier meaning of what this text is talking about in regard to the ethnologists. Okay. So then we're looking at that they explain a fear as an emotional and a bodily response that exists for the purpose of protecting us from danger. Naturally, fear motivates us to seek safety so as to survive stressful, life-threatening situations. This fight or flight mode that we talk about, okay, that's obviously an important idea. depicts this perfectly. For example, walking home late at night. You may hear sudden sounds or movements around in a nearby bush. Beyond your control, your body reacts to it. It alerts you to a possible danger. You are pumped with adrenaline. You find yourself ready to run for your life or turn back to fight your enemy. So that is now an explanation further of that fight or flight response. Can you see main idea coming through and then the other ideas are being built around it in the paragraph? Okay, so that's how you would then dissect these paragraphs for further understanding. Then we're looking at paragraph 4 and 5. 4 is dealing with perceiving risk positively can yield numerous benefits for the individual and the group. So here again, you're going to find they'll talk about things like the less time you spend on coping with fear, the more time you have to make improved decisions. Ask yourself the question, is that information relevant to the purpose of or the intention of the writer? Is he trying to make me see a particular point of view here? All right, and then you find out whether that's relevant and link it again to the title and the content you've read so far. Most extreme sports, whether skydiving or bungee jumping, have one very significant attribute in common. They are individual sports. In contrast to team sports, you are on your own. Your survival or death is all on you. Now, that is obviously very important in terms of finding the main idea here. So the difference is the comparison between your skydiving or your bungee jumping, which is an individual sport, as compared to your sporting code that requires a team to play together. It's not as dangerous as the one where you have to rely on your own expertise to survive. Okay, so that's the main idea of paragraph 5. Notice the difference in the length of paragraph 4 and paragraph 5. Okay, that's important. Remember, I said to you that single sentence paragraph. Why is it there? It's there obviously for a reason, and that's usually to get the main idea of what this writer is speaking about across to us. Okay, he's emphasizing his viewpoint. Then we go on to paragraph 6. There we're looking again at personalities of extreme sport participants. They've revealed a certain shared personality trait and attribute for their participants. For example, skydivers have been found either to have or to develop an internal locus of control. While the locus of control, with the locus of control, you attribute successes and failures to your own controllable actions rather than external uncontrollable events. And that is another important point in that paragraph. So as you read the other paragraphs, you will find that. And I'm going to skip those next two paragraphs. And I'm going to go to the bottom of the this context, which is now paragraph 10. That states, this is the concluding paragraph. What did I say to you about the conclusion? I said to you, look that the author or the writer has concluded this topic in a relevant way, or he summed up the ideas very well in the conclusion. If he's done that, then he's got his point of view across to us. So it says, attracting over 8 million people to witness the famous jump, it will be fascinating to find out what the next limit we push together will be. All right. So that is important. That 8 million, remember, we spoke about it at the beginning, where it was an event that was superseding that of a presidential event or even an Olympic event. It brought over 8 million viewers together to watch this Daredevil event taking place. And that is linked to the conclusion, which means that there would have been supporting evidence of this idea in paragraphs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so you will go back and read that in your own time. So let's look at now the questioning techniques by the examiners. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to break them down into two aspects so that you can now also understand what we're looking at in each of the questions. So if you had a question that's posed like this: what is the function of the rhetorical question in the byline? And that question is not relevant to the text. So let's just skip this all together. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's look at lines 2 to 5. This is now the relevant question. All right. So refer to lines 2 to 5. It wasn't a presidential event. Remember that idea? Above the earth. So that jump is so many kilometers above the earth. What point is the writer making in these lines? This is what the question word is asking. What? And they want to know about the point that is made in those lines. So we go back to line 2 to 5, and then we try and reorganize the facts to give a response. So this is a comprehension type question, meaning we're going to use keywords in the paragraph to give an answer in this response. All right. So remember that idea about the presidential event, the Olympic event. And I said to you there already when we were going through it that it was not an important event like that. But nevertheless, it yielded a lot of people, over 8 million. Okay, so an answer would be going towards that kind of response. So it said, under normal circumstances, a major international event would attract a wide audience, showing how popular extreme sport has become. You will get 2 marks for that. The jump, not the usual type of event to attract mass attention. Okay, that's given us the 2 marks there. People love to see how far boundaries can be pushed, and that would give you 2 marks. So we're saying it wasn't a presidential event because it wasn't that important, but it still yielded a lot of audience because it was a daredevil event. So therefore, we would have expected it to be maybe a presidential event or an Olympic event, but this daredevil event still brought as much of an audience for it to be viewed at. Okay, so you're looking at that there. Then question 1.2 asks the following. Explain. So this is highlighted for you. Explain is the instruction word. What you understand by the phrase bizarre event. Okay, that's in line 6. So if we go back to the text, let's go back to the text. And we're looking at line 6. So that will probably be in paragraph 2. Or yes, paragraph 2. So here it says, why such a bizarre event attracted millions of us is questionable. So that's the line we're looking at, line 6. Notice it's referred us to line 6, and that's where we are focusing our answer or ideas around. Okay, so when we go back to the question, let's just get back to that screen. It's there. All right, so this is again looking at your understanding on level 2 to level 3. Can you reorganize information? Can you infer meaning from what you have read? All right, so the word bizarre would mean something and an event would mean something. Now, can you understand that I'm testing your comprehension skills here, right? You should again use keywords from that paragraph or those lines to answer your question. Okay, so the answer is, it is an event that is unusual and defies logic. In other words, it's saying to us that it is so far from what would just be a normal expectation. It's bizarre, it's weird, it's unusual. All right, these are the kind of synonyms we're looking at, and therefore it is not something that is logical for us to do. You don't expect people to jump 40 kilometers above the earth level, for example. Okay, that's crazy stuff. So it's bizarre, it's weird, it's unusual. It's not something that's done every day. All right, so you'll accept that, we'll accept that kind of answers from you. 2 marks for those 2 ideas coming through. All right. Then paragraph 3 is the next question asking of us to refer to. It says, discuss. Now that again falls under the level 3 to 4. So we're saying, can you now evaluate and formulate judgments or opinions based on what you have read? Okay, so discuss the apparent contradiction in this paragraph. So in other words, the examiner is saying to me, there is a possible contradiction, or there is a contradiction in this text. You need to find the contradiction in that paragraph and then obviously give us a response in relation to that, because they want a discussion. We got to discuss our ideas around that particular contradiction. Right. So it's a technical question. It's got an element of technicality in it. We are giving you what's contained in that paragraph or that line. We want you to respond to that. Okay. So the answer is, there is a contradiction in people's response to danger. In order to survive, some will fight for their lives, but others will run away. So that flight or fight response that we spoke about at the beginning when I was discussing the paragraphs with you, there it comes in here. All right. So there is a contradiction in people's response to danger. In order to survive, we will either fight for our lives, or you will get others who would run away in that situation. Both of the groups see their actions as essential for survival. So that's where that second and third mark comes in. So what may be good for you may be bad for me. That kind of idea. What may be bad for you may be good for me. So if I'm going to stand and fight, you may decide to run away because for you, that's too much to deal with. Okay, so that's what that apparent contradiction is speaking about in relation to the text. Okay, the flight or fight response. Okay, good. Then let's look at 1.7. The question asks the following. Suggest why direct speech is used in paragraph 7. So again, we are knowing that direct speech is used, but we want to know from you, why do you think that the author used the direct speech? So we're asking an inference question here. We want to see your viewpoint in relation to paragraph 7. All right, so note, it is a technical type question. So you should answer this question using the key words from the question itself. So if you provided a technical answer, you would be guaranteed of 1 mark. For you to get the second or the third mark, you need to expand on the issue. All right, that's the 1 mark, and then link those ideas to the text would then give you the 3rd mark. So there's 3 aspects that you need to focus on when we have the 3 mark allocated for this kind of question. All right, so how would we then have a response formulated? It goes like this. The direct speech creates a celebratory tone and it has a dramatic effect. It makes the readers understand that the speaker's achievement is there and makes it more real. He feels affirmed or reaffirmed in this case. The reader is invited to identify with the positive experience and envisage a sense of accomplishment. All right, so those 3 marks are coming through there. You can see I've got more than 3 ticks, which I'm showing you where possibly 3 marks would come from. All right, so there's many ideas there in this answer. So if you had 3 of them, you would be getting the marks. Okay, so a maximum of 2 marks if you're lifting from the text. So in other words, when we're talking about lifting, yes, it's important to note there is what we call a full lifting, and then sort of a not what is the word I'm looking for? The one where there's just kind of maybe 1 or 2 words from the text, but it's called clever lifting in that instance. Okay, so you've maybe changed one or two words, or you've taken out a comma here or an apostrophe there, and it then changes the meaning of the sentence, okay, for example. So when that happens in the comprehension passage, let's say you've removed the apostrophe or you removed the comma or that kind of thing, and either it's changed the idea or it's maintaining the idea, it would depend on what you're doing there, okay? So when that happens, we would only give you 2 marks. We would then give you 2 or 3 marks, okay? But if it's exactly word for word with the question mark there, with the exclamation mark there, with the capital letter in the same place as the original text, we would then give you a maximum of 2 when you are looking for your answer in this response. All right. Then let's look at 1.3. It was phrased like this as well. Account, the instruction word, for the use of the rhetorical questions in lines 6 to 8. Why do dangerous all the way to want the throw? So if we go back to lines 6 to 8, it's a level 3 question. Let's go back to the text. We're looking at lines 6 to 8. Let's go back. There we go. Right. So line 6 to 8 says, why such a bizarre event attracted millions of us is questionable. Why do dangerous activities like extreme sports excite us? What motivates us to participate in them? Why do we want the throw? So we're looking at line 6 there to line 7 and 8. All right. So that's asking us those questions, or asking of us to ask ourselves questions. So let's just see what your response is asking of you, looking for here. Right, all the way there. So it's a level 3, and it's saying, again, you need to see the following. You have to consider why the technique is used. In other words, the rhetorical questions. Why did the writer use rhetorical questions? I don't want the definition. I want to know why he's used it in this particular instance. And then I want you to give a fair or an unbiased response based on what you have read. Okay, so the answer says, the rhetorical questions probe the core issues of why people engage in extreme sports. So it's provoking, it's delving deeper to understand, why do we crave this thrill? Why do we continue to watch these kind of sports? Okay, that gives us the 2 marks already. The rhetorical questions elicit a response from the reader. Okay, in other words, it makes you think further about what could possibly come out as a response here. It encourages the reader to become directly involved. So in this instance, you would have got 2 marks for those kind of responses, any of those 3 responses. Okay, then we've got number 1.9. It says, refer to paragraphs 9 and 10. Evaluate the effectiveness of the concluding paragraph. Now that is important. We are asking you for a discussion, and the discussion needs to then be around the concluding paragraph as highlighted to you here. So we're asking ourselves that question that I posed before to you. The conclusion. Did it sum up all of the ideas in the content and allow us to make sense of what the writer is saying? Or did it just hang there as just a thought? Okay, obviously we would want the writer to conclude his piece of work with a relevant viewpoint, okay? And there he would obviously give us information that's found within the text in his conclusion as well to substantiate his viewpoint on the topic. So we're saying, based on what you've read as well in terms of the conclusion and the content linked to the conclusion, what is it in terms of the effect it had on you as a person? So you're going to give us your opinion, and you're going to give us a substantiation to why you hold that viewpoint. So the answer was, there is a distinct link between the introductory paragraph and the conclusion of the text. So we are saying there is definitely a link there. In both paragraphs, the famous risky jump is mentioned. So remember that we also saw that, okay, that 80 million the 8 million viewership, for example, it superseded the presidential election. Okay, that idea that was done in paragraph 2, paragraph 1, sorry, and then obviously now in paragraph 10. There is a cohesion that is brought about in paragraph 10 in the text as a whole because it is thematically linked with the preceding paragraphs. In other words, the central idea, the central lesson is mentioned in paragraph 10 and it's linked to the paragraphs before that, all the way to paragraph 2 and 3, as we've mentioned. And therefore, that's your second mark there. The concluding paragraph creates a sense of anticipation in the reader. It suggests that the writer wants to challenge us to explore a particular limit. All right. So that is where our third mark comes from. Right? So you would look at this question in terms of that way to break it down. Your understanding and whether it has achieved its purpose in an effective way or a non-effective way. Okay, explain that and discuss it. So let's look at a recap of the question words. Now, I've taken you through what the comprehension is all about. I've taken you through your role as a candidate. I've taken you through how to break down the paragraphs to make yourself understand what's going on. So you are reading for understanding. You are reading and decoding the information that is contained in the text. While you're doing that, you have your eyes in the search mode. You're trying to find the gist of each paragraph, the main idea of each paragraph, and then where all the other ideas are coming or formulated around that topic sentence. Okay. So hopefully you will go back and you will revise how to work with the comprehension passage. Look at also the difference between a comprehension type of question and a technical element question. Okay, so in other words, you would see the technical one is saying this is the rhetorical questions, this is the device I'm mentioning to you. I want to see its relevance in relation to the content you are reading. So that's where that technical aspect comes in, whereas the comprehension part of the comprehension type questioning is testing your understanding of what you've read. Can you decode? Have you understood certain ideas while you read that particular text? And that's how you need to go back and revise for this particular March test and your June examination. So when you're looking at question words, look at, for example, the ones that have been used over the last 3 to 5 years in question papers. Those are more or less where the examiners questioning techniques are coming from. Okay, so look at it, but it's not to say that that is the recipe that's always going to be used. So you got to go back and look at all of the instruction words you've learned thus far and remember what they are asking of you. So for example, the word analyze is saying or is asking of you to discuss the main ideas and their importance, their relevance, what makes them important. All right, while you're breaking down for understanding why is this important to have that information, discussions must come through. The word comment would say discuss or criticize and explain in full. So you're going to then discuss the ideas that we're looking at, again, in relation to the paragraphs we're talking about, okay? So if you're looking at paragraph 10, we want to see that paragraph, whether it made sense or not. So you will criticize, you will basically diagnose whether that paragraph made sense or not. If it did, you would have certain points as to why it made sense. If it didn't, you'd also have certain points. So your explanation would be in detail given to us. Then we're looking at the word compare, for example. There we're looking at the similarities that might be found between the two texts, okay? Then you can also compare differences that is there, all right? So that's not to say that because the word compare means they must be similar. For example, the similarities must come through. That's not the case. We can compare the differences and the similarities, all right? Then the word define, that instruction word. Distinguish accurately between what is and what is not. So when you are defining, you're going to be able to say this is what it is and this is what it is not. Okay, so I'm getting this meaning and it is what I'm understanding. I'm not getting this meaning, therefore it's not making sense. Okay, so define something, distinguish accurately, please. Describe, again here, grade 12s, it is to give us a detailed account of the topic. So we would say to you, describe the use of the words in this particular paragraph. You need to obviously be knowing what we're talking about there. Right. Then the next word, discuss. This calls for arguments that you are going to raise in favor of or against the statement. So a discussion would take place where you would give us what is the pros, what is the cons of this particular conclusion, for example, or this text when you're trying to formulate your opinion or judgment. Right. Then evaluate. This is where we're looking at check the worth of the content given to us. What of it was truth? What of it was important? What was not very important, for example? In other words, if we remove this information, it didn't change much in terms of understanding the text. So that's important, okay? And then the word synthesize, can you then integrate the information and draw conclusions? Right. Then we've got other words that are important, like, for example, explain. There we want to say, interpret what we are giving to you in your own words, and then clarify that for us with a substantiation. Give us the reason as to why that viewpoint is valid. Now remember, we have a marking guideline to work with. Now, if your viewpoint is different from the marking guideline, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. But if you do not substantiate that viewpoint, then obviously it's questionable. It's a question of where did it come from? All right. So you need to then make sure you justify why that view is correct. Okay. Give us evidence for that. That would be your reasons. Then illustrate, interpret, for example, relate, not featuring too much, neither is outline or tabulate. But we do get, for example, questions like question word state being used, where we want you to give a description of the most important aspects of the topic. All right, so grade 12s. In conclusion to this lesson on comprehension skills, you need to go back, please. Ask your teachers questions in terms of how to break down a text to make yourself understand it. If you're that candidate who is flying high, in other words, you are getting your concepts, you understand what's been spoken about, you are able to apply it, then by all means, that's fair and well enough, okay? But you still need to go and practice how to answer other question papers or other content that is not in that particular question that you are dealing with. So you got to read a variety of texts and then see if you still understand what those texts are speaking about. Right. So you need to go back and revise your past exam papers within the time constraints. So for example, if it says you need to dedicate 80 minutes to this paper, then you sit down, you time yourself, you put down your alarm on for 80 minutes and you tackle. All right. Question 1, section A, how many minutes do I need? Section B, how many minutes do I need? And you continue. So please look at that, all right? And the allocation for comprehension, obviously, is the chunk of the paper. It's 30 marks. It will require a lot more time and a lot more understanding on your part, okay? So if you mess up the comprehension, although there's still opportunity to get the other 40 marks, but sometimes you can make a mistake, okay? So we can't guarantee that you can get the 40 marks, for example. But if you work with the comprehension, you can definitely get at least a minimum mark for the comprehension. Right, so be aware of the mark allocation as I mentioned before. There will also be contained within the text some jargon. In other words, the terms that are used in that particular field of study that would dictate how we'd understand the text, okay? Use the exam paper as a resource. Right? So highlight and make notes about that information on the text. Answer the questions in order of preference and experience. Now, if you find that you may be faster in terms of dealing with the technical questions, then go ahead and do that, okay? If you find that your comprehension skills are a little bit more advanced and you're able to get answers quickly, then go ahead and do that as well. So you would use your understanding of how you work with comprehensions thus far when you are answering. But again, grade 12s, don't spend more than the allocated time on the text. Because if you're not getting the point, it doesn't make sense to waste your time there and then miss the opportunity to score in the other questions. But if you are the candidate who values this comprehension and you want to make sure you do very well, then put the practice into motion already so that you get the maximum marks. Right. We as teachers will encourage you to please bring in examples of striking adverts, for example, or cartoons. These can be brought into class and ask sir, for example, or ma'am, to explain concepts that you have dealt with if you're doing visual literacy. Now, let's say ma'am says to you, we're going to be doing comprehension tomorrow, and she might just tell you, okay, prepare, go and read basically page, whatever, whatever. So if you then read that pages in your book, and you found what that topic is going to be all about, you can bring in an advert or a cartoon that's related to certain aspects of the text. And then you'd see how practically to work with a comparison question there, for example. Right. So also practice the exam paper under your time conditions, as I mentioned to you, because the length of the exam paper can vary, and this means a strategy must be adopted by yourself, okay, which would then allow you to answer all the questions in the quickest way possible, but still getting the relevant marks. Right. There are a significant number of online resources that are out there, and there's tutorials available. And these will be expanded upon each year. So please make use of these, but also be sure that what you are making use of, that resource or that text that you're making as a use of, that it actually is a valid one for your cohort in terms of your age group, your understanding of key concepts in terms of themes maybe that could possibly be looked at when you're discussing content in classes, all right? But remember, our papers, language paper 1 is not theme based, okay? So we need to look at that. Then, attached to this particular PowerPoint, we have some worksheets for you. Please go back and then draw up your own as well and look at how would I be able to explain the main idea of this text. Can I look at maybe a 1-line or 2-line summary of each paragraph? That would then bring me to at least an understanding of what's going on. And then can I get the gist in at least about 10 words maximum of what the text is all about? And that will help you to gain understanding. And then a gist summary, I've noted for you there to please look at the key question words. In other words, leading question words like who is saying what? What are they saying about this particular topic? When are they bringing these ideas across to me? Where are the ideas coming from that they're talking about? Okay. Why did this writer decide to write this particular piece at this given time when it seems maybe relevant or irrelevant to me? You ask yourself this kind of question. And then how did me reading this particular text, how did it affect me emotionally? Was I maybe found to be wanting in my understanding? Was I affected negatively in terms of my viewpoints have changed all now to the negative or in a positive way? All right. So that's the kind of ideas you need to look at when you're working with the comprehension passage. All right. And then grade 12, that brings us to the end of this lesson on comprehension skills. We have now covered 2 aspects of your control test and your June exam. So that is your summary and your comprehension passages, how to diagnose and analyze them. So going forward, we will still dissect this paper 1 as well, so that we are definitely sort of revising or prepping ourselves for a full-on paper, there might be in March, or definitely in the June exam, paper 1 would also be tested. Okay, so please join me for another lesson in the weeks to come on English Home Language, where we'll be dealing with English paper 1. Please take care of yourself. Until next time, it's ciao for now.